Welcome to Legacy Lines Podcast. I'm your host, Jay. If you enjoy immersive stories about hidden history, emotional survival, resilience, and the human experience, make sure to follow the podcast on Spotify and share this episode with someone who loves meaningful stories. And now to tonight's story. Trauma does something strange to memory. Sometimes the mind protects itself by forgetting details. Other times, it protects itself by remembering only one. In the winter of 1968, 3 children disappeared near the Black Hollow rail line. The town blamed the cold. The police blamed runaway fantasies. The parents blamed themselves. But 58 years later, one retired dispatcher opened a box nobody was supposed to find. Inside were photographs, interview tapes, and a report marked, "Do not reopen." Some communities don't heal by confronting pain. They heal by burying it alive. This is the children beneath the tracks. Black Hollow was never meant to survive. Built around a rail line in early 1900s, the town existed for one reason: movement. Coal moved through it, steel moved through it, workers moved through it, and eventually grief moved through it too. By 1968, Black Hollow was collapsing. Factories were closing. Men disappeared into alcohol. Mothers carried exhaustion like a second skin. Children learned silence before they learned safety. But the railroad still ran through town like a scar. Every morning the whistle shook windows. Every night it reminded people that somewhere else existed. But most people in Black Hollow never left. And the ones who stayed developed a certain philosophy: survival first, feel later. That mindset passed from fathers to sons, from mothers to daughters. Nobody used the word trauma back then. They called it toughness. In December 1968, snow had started early that year. The roads were iced over, the sky looked bruised, and somewhere between 5:10 and 5:45 p.m., 3 children vanished into thin air near the abandoned railroad crossing at Mercer Field. Their names: Evelyn Shaw, age 11, Marcus Reed, age 12, and Daniel Pike, age 9. By midnight, the entire town was searching for them. Flashlights moved through forest, men shouted names into frozen darkness, and dogs tracked scents that disappeared near the tracks. But by morning, something changed. People literally stopped asking what happened and started asking why nobody wanted to talk about it. The official story was simple. The children wandered too close to the tracks during bad weather. Authorities suggested exposure, disorientation, and possibly drowning near Hollow Creek. Case closed. Except almost nobody remembered the story the same way. One witness claimed she heard screaming around 5:30 p.m. Another remembered seeing headlights near the rail yard long after the area was supposedly empty. A retired mechanic later told his daughter he saw a train stopped on the track that night, despite records showing no scheduled rail traffic. Then there were the tapes. In 2024, retired dispatcher Leonard Vale discovered several interview reels hidden in a maintenance archive. One recording captured a deputy saying something investigators later denied hearing. It said, "We got movement by the crossing. Kids, maybe, No, wait, somebody else is there. The tape cuts immediately after. And to this day, nobody knows why. Or maybe somebody does. Black Hollow had a history of protecting itself. And not because the town was evil, but because people believed survival required silence. The factories were already dying, jobs were disappearing. The town could not survive scandal. And as we know, when communities become desperate, truth becomes negotiable. The search continued for days. Marcus's coat was found first, folded strangely near a rusted signal post. Then one shoe belonging to Evelyn. However, Daniel Pike, or even a trace of him, was never found, at least not officially. That absence changed everything. The hardest part about tragedy is rarely the event itself. It's what happens afterwards. Black Hollow became quieter after 1968. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence people carry because speaking feels dangerous. Evelyn's mother stopped attending church. Marcus's father began sleeping in his truck outside the old rail station. And Daniel Pike's older sister, Rebecca, developed panic attacks every time she heard train whistles. But nobody talked about mental health. Back then, grief stayed hidden. Men drank, women endured, children adapted. Rebecca Pike once described it this way. She said, "It felt like the whole town decided we were supposed to move on before we even understood what happened." That sentence explains more than the investigation ever did, because unresolved trauma doesn't disappear. It mutates. Some people become emotionally numb. Others become hypervigilant. Some spend decades searching for meaning, and some build entirely new identities just to survive what they remembered. Rebecca left Black Hollow at 19 years old. She even changed her name, moved 3 whole states away, and never had children. Years later, she admitted something chilling during an interview, and she said, "I think I spent my whole life trying not to become the version of myself that died that winter." This is the hidden cost of survival. Not everybody who survives trauma remains fully present afterwards. Some people leave psychologically long before they leave physically. And believe it or not, communities do the exact same thing. Black Hollow survived economically for another decade, but emotionally, it never recovered. In 2024, Leonard Vell was helping clear an abandoned dispatch office scheduled for demolition. Inside a locked cabinet, he found a small gray storage box. No labels, no catalog number, just one handwritten warning: do not archive. Inside were photographs, interview transcripts, rail logs, and one report dated December 14th, 1968. This report described an unscheduled freight train parked near Mercer Crossing for 37 minutes. Again, 37 minutes. The same window during which the children disappeared. But that train never appeared in any official records. Leonard later told investigators something that still unsettles them. He said that the weirdest part wasn't the missing paperwork. It was how relieved people seemed that nobody asked questions anymore. That reaction says everything. Human beings often believe silence protects them, but silence has consequences. It spreads like wildfire. Children inherit it. Families adapt around it. And as you see, entire towns build identities around avoiding the pain of those. And eventually, the silence becomes more powerful than the truth itself. The files suggested several possibilities: an accidental death, a cover-up, negligence, possible abuse tied to railroad employees, but not one single explanation fully fit, which means the mystery remained. And maybe that uncertainty became its own kind of trauma, because the human brain struggles with unresolved endings. We want certainty, closure. We want narratives that make suffering feel meaningful. But real life rarely works that way. Sometimes healing means accepting that not every wound receives an explanation. Psychologists sometimes describe trauma as a fracture in time, a moment so emotionally overwhelming that the brain itself cannot process it normally. People become trapped between before and after. And Black Hollow became a town trapped between before and after. Before the disappearance and after the silence. What fascinated researchers wasn't only the mystery itself, it was the long-term emotional fallout. Children who grew up there reported chronic anxiety, distrust of authority, emotional detachment, fear of abandonment, recurring nightmares involving trains. Even people born years later seemed affected by the emotional atmosphere, because trauma can become cultural, passed down through behavior, through fear, through silence. One therapist studying generational trauma explained it like this: children don't need to hear the story to inherit the emotional consequences of it. Now, for me, that may be the most terrifying truth of all. Not that pain exists, but that unspoken pain continues. Some survivors eventually returned to Black Hollow, not because they wanted answers, but because they wanted to reclaim the parts of themselves the town took away. One such survivor, Rebecca Pike, returned at 72 years old. She stood near the abandoned crossing where her brother disappeared, and for the first time in decades, she spoke his name out loud. Daniel. Witnesses said she cried for nearly 10 minutes without speaking again. Later, she was reported as saying, "I spent my whole life trying to outrun this place. But healing started the moment I stopped pretending it didn't shape me." This is the paradox of recovery. Sometimes healing doesn't come from forgetting. Sometimes it comes from finally allowing yourself to remember, but to remember honestly. The children beneath the tracks were never fully found, but neither were the people who spent decades pretending they were. Black Hollow still exists. The rail line is abandoned now. Grass grows through the tracks. The station windows are broken, but locals still describe hearing phantom whistles at night. Maybe memory works like that. Maybe grief does too. Just echoing through generations, waiting for someone brave enough to finally listen. Because the most dangerous thing trauma steals, it isn't safety. It's identity. And maybe, just maybe, healing begins the moment we stop protecting the silence that hurt us. This has been Legacy Lines Podcast. Remember, every voice has a story. Every story builds a legacy. If this story moved you, follow Legacy Lines Podcast on Spotify and share this episode with someone who understands how silence can shape an entire life. Because hidden stories only say hidden when nobody speaks them out loud.